Don't mess up what you don't understand." The words dripped with mockery, echoing across the missile control room as every eye turned to the quiet civilian crouched over the guidance panel. She didn't answer, just kept working, until her hand slid a metal plate aside and a line of engraved symbols caught the commander's eye. "Raven X!" His breath stopped. Her past wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Seconds later, the alarm screamed, a tomahawk roared off the deck, and she did the impossible, redirected it mid-flight without detonation. If her aim faltered by even a fraction, the blast would have lit the horizon for miles. This is veteran biker. Comment 1 if you're new, 2 if you've been with us, 3 if you ride with us every week. Like, subscribe, and stay to the end. The hum of electronics filled the control deck, blending with the deep, steady thrum of the ship's engines. Dozens of screens bathed the compartment in a shifting palette of green and amber, reflecting off steel bulkheads polished by years of use. The air tasted faintly of ozone and machine oil, a smell any sailor knew by heart. Don't mess up what you don't understand. The jab cut through the low murmur of voices. It came from a young lieutenant standing by the secondary console, his smirk illuminated by the soft glow of the monitors. His words were loud enough for the whole room to hear, timed precisely so the other technicians would glance over. At the far end, Lena Ardent knelt by the main missile guidance panel. She wore the plain coveralls issued to contractors, the kind meant to blend in with the machinery. Without looking up, she adjusted the torque on a recessed fastener, her focus locked to the job in front of her. The tension in her posture was almost invisible, hidden under the economy of her movements. But it was there. A few chuckles broke out near the back. Someone muttered something about desk-trained civvies, and another voice replied with a snicker. The sound barely touched her. She'd been through far worse than petty barbs in a brightly lit control room. The lieutenant took a step closer, leaning in as though inspecting her work, but his real intent was to watch for a flinch. He got nothing. Lena's hand slid a narrow plate aside. Beneath it, on the brushed metal of the control housing, was a series of engraved characters so fine they almost vanished. In the light, until the ship rolled slightly, and the glow from the overhead fixtures caught them just right. From across the room, Commander Adrian Corr was in mid-sentence with his second in command. His gaze shifted, drawn by a flicker of light and pattern on the open panel. In the space of a heartbeat, his voice trailed off. His eyes locked onto those markings, intricate, deliberate, unmistakable to anyone who'd served in the Black Tier operations. Raven X. The syllables rang in his head like a silent alarm. That designation wasn't supposed to exist, and he took a slow step forward, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile moment of recognition. Lena didn't react to his approach. Her fingers moved with surgical precision, disconnecting a cluster of leads, reseating them, tightening, each coupling with the kind of surety only someone intimately familiar with the system could manage. Then a sound split the hum of the deck. 3 sharp, rising beeps followed by the harsh klaxon of a critical alert. Red light began pulsing from the wall-mounted indicators, washing the room in waves of warning. "Radar contact," called a voice from the upper tier. "Simulation target breaching the test perimeter. Guidance sync failure on both tubes." The lieutenant who had mocked her looked up in surprise, the color draining slightly from his face. Corr didn't hesitate. "Ardent, you're on it now." Heads turned. She didn't argue, didn't waste a breath asking why the ship's commander had just put a civilian in the hot seat. She slid into the operator's position, her knees brushing the edge of the console as she reached for the dual input pads. The seat's regular occupant shifted aside, watching her with the wary curiosity of someone who suspects they're about to learn something important. The system was in disarray. Data streams lagged, targeting arrays were out of sync, and the auto-correction routine was locked in a loop. Her eyes tracked the scrolling diagnostics in one window while her hands overrode safety interlocks in another. She adjusted frequency gates, manually aligning telemetry that should have been handled by software. The room fell quiet, save for the hiss of cooling fans and the distant crash of waves against the hull. Core watched from over her shoulder, saying nothing. She keyed in a sequence that bypassed the primary operating layer, diving into a sub-level view a board could even access. The interface changed, colors flattening, text sharper, less forgiving. Every choice here mattered. Systems realigning, she said, voice low but steady. 17 seconds to full sync. The lieutenant's jaw worked as he hovered nearby, clearly wanting to say something but thinking better of it. Data streams stabilized. On the forward display, the simulated target's trajectory locked into place. A firing solution blinked green. Core's tone was measured. Fire control, execute test shot. A countdown began, each number punctuated by the groan of the ship's launch apparatus, prepping for release. At 0, a deep, resonant thud reverberated through the deck as the Tomahawk surged forward, breaking into open air. On the main display, its path arced cleanly across the grid overlay, adjusting mid-flight to compensate for simulated crosswinds and evasive maneuvers from the target. In the lower corner of the screen, accuracy data updated in real time, closing in on near perfection. The hit was clean. The target indicator winked out, replaced by a confirmation banner. A ripple of astonishment moved through the control crew. Someone gave a low whistle. Others exchanged looks, the kind that carried a silent, "Did you see that?" Lena didn't celebrate. She stood, unfastened her coveralls at the collar to cool down, and stepped back from the station. Her eyes found the deck plating at her feet for a moment, as if grounding herself there before facing the inevitable questions. Core dismissed the firing crew, then lingered by the console. His gaze shifted from the display to the now-covered panel she had opened earlier. Whatever conversation needed to happen would not take place here, not with an audience. From the upper tier, the normal chatter resumed, but there was an undercurrent now, a different texture to the glances cast in her direction. The mocking tone from before had vanished, replaced by curiosity and a hint of unease. As the red alert lights dimmed back to steady white, Lena quietly gathered her tools. The engraved symbols beneath that panel remained hidden once more, as if they had never been revealed. She slung her kit over one shoulder and walked toward the maintenance hatch at the side of the deck. Behind her, Core's voice followed, calm but carrying the weight of intent. Ardent. "My ready room. 5 minutes." She didn't look back, but the faint tightening of her grip on the kit's handle told its own story. The door slid open with a hiss, letting her step into the quieter corridor beyond. The sounds of the control deck faded behind her, replaced by the steady rhythm of her own footsteps and the low rumble of the ship cutting through the waves. Somewhere in her mind a different sound echoed, a memory she'd spent years locking away, the kind that reminded her why she'd sworn never to wear that code again. The corridor leading to the captain's quarters was narrow, lined with framed photographs and commendations from decades of service. Each one glinted under the strip lights, a muted testament to the ship's long history. Lena walked it without rushing, her eyes fixed ahead, ignoring the sideways glances from the petty officers she passed. When she reached the heavy hatch, the guard stationed there stepped aside at a single nod from inside. The door slid open, revealing a compartment stripped of any excess. Functional, precise, just like the man who commanded it. Commander Adrian Corr stood by the porthole, hands clasped behind. His back, the faint shimmer of the horizon reflected in the glass. He didn't turn immediately. Instead, his voice came low and deliberate. "You've been on this ship for 48 hours, Ardent, and I've already had to rewrite my assessment twice." Lena set her toolkit on the deck beside the bulkhead, straightened, and waited. He pivoted to face her, his eyes sharper here than they'd been on the control deck, as if the privacy gave him permission to drop any mask of diplomacy. "Where did you learn to execute a manual sync at that speed?" She could have lied. Contractors often padded their resumes. A little bravado could explain away an impressive performance. But the tone in his question wasn't curiosity. It was accusation wrapped in curiosity's clothing. "I learned to adapt," she said finally. "When systems don't cooperate, you find another path." Corr studied her for a moment longer before walking to his desk. He tapped a control on the embedded display, and a hollow image projected into the air. An overhead schematic of the missile guidance system she'd just handled. Highlighted in crimson was the exact panel she'd exposed. He gestured toward it. "Explain this?" Her gaze flicked to the floating image, then back to him. "It's a maintenance plate." "It's a grave marker," he countered, his voice hardening. "Those etchings are from a decommissioned protocol, one that was supposed to be erased after Hormuz. Only a handful of people ever had clearance to even see that script." The silence between them stretched. Outside the porthole, sunlight rippled over the waves, unbothered by the tension in the room. Finally, she spoke. "If you're implying I shouldn't know about it, you're right." That earned a flicker of surprise in his eyes, not at the admission, but at the calm with which she gave it. Before he could press further, the intercom crackled. "Commander, bridge reports irregular contact on approach vector 217. Simulated drill confirmed suspended until further notice." Corr tapped the com. "Understood. Maintain observation. Alert me to any deviation in speed or heading." He cut the channel and returned his attention to her. "Seems we'll have company sooner than planned." Lena didn't ask for details. The strain in the bridge officer's voice had said enough. Corr moved behind his desk, but he didn't sit. "You handled that test shot like someone who's done it under fire. And I don't mean on a screen in a training facility. You know the risks, the split-second calls, the price when they go wrong." She felt the familiar tightness in her chest. The weight of a memory she'd locked behind 1,000 mental barriers. He leaned forward slightly, bracing his hands on the desk. "So tell me, Ardent, why hide behind a contractor's badge when you can read a dead protocol like it's your native language?" Her reply was quieter this time, but no less firm. "Because sometimes the safest place to be is where no one's looking." That answer didn't satisfy him, but it intrigued him enough to hold off on more questions. The room's comm panel chimed again. This time, the urgency was sharper. "Bridge to commander. Target vessel has altered course, closing distance." No response to hails. Corr's expression shifted into the controlled alertness of a man sliding into operational mode. "That's your cue to return to engineering, Ardent." She didn't move. "If your guidance system still has residual sync lag from the earlier fault, you'll never hit a moving target without risking a misfire." He regarded her for a long beat, then keyed the door. "Walk with me." They moved briskly through the passageways, the ship's heartbeat A steady vibration through the deck, seeming just a touch faster now. Crew members stepped aside, some glancing at Lena with the lingering curiosity from earlier, others too focused on their own tasks to notice. By the time they reached the control deck, the lighting had shifted to amber alert status. The tactical display dominated the forward wall, showing a blip approaching their position with unnerving steadiness. "Distance?" Core called out. 16 nautical miles and closing," came the reply from the sensor officer. "Still no ID?" Lena slid toward an auxiliary console, bringing up the guidance status. The earlier errors had been suppressed, but traces of instability pulsed at the edges of the readouts, enough to cause problems in a live scenario. Core joined her. "Can you clear it?" "Yes," she said, fingers already moving, "but I'll need to bypass another layer to keep it from looping back." "That panel again?" She gave a single nod. He weighed the choice for half a second, then signaled to the security petty officer nearby. No one interrupts her. "Understood?" The petty officer acknowledged, taking position to block curious onlookers. Lena opened the maintenance plate once more, her hands steady as she threaded through the sequence. This time she was acutely aware of Core's presence beside her, not just as a commander, but as someone beginning to see through the cover she'd worn since boarding. Lines of code streamed across the screen, the kind written for machines that had no patience for hesitation. She navigated them like old streets in a long-forgotten city, finding the path that would reroute the signal cleanly. The blip on the tactical display edged closer. Voices around them sharpened, the hum of the deck rising in pitch with the tension. 5 miles, the sensor officer reported. Still no ID. Speed unchanged. Lena keyed the final command, watching as the system stabilized. The red warning tags vanished, replaced by a clean, steady green. Core's voice cut through the air. "Fire control, stand by for potential engagement." The deck bristled with focus. Around them, every crew member seemed to tighten into readiness. Lena stepped back from the console, letting the cover fall into place again. The etchings disappeared from sight, but their presence lingered in the commander's mind. He didn't thank her, not here, not now. But the brief glance they exchanged carried its own weight. As the unidentified vessel closed within range, the control deck felt like the eye of a storm, calm for the moment, but surrounded on all sides by the possibility of violence. For Lena, it was a familiar calm, one she hadn't expected to feel again. The kind that came just before the world demanded you choose between revealing who you were or letting the cost be paid by someone else. The air on the control deck had changed. It wasn't just the lighting or the blip advancing on the tactical screen. It was the quiet that settled over everyone. That particular quiet where every breath feels loud, every movement measured. "Contact at 3 miles, the sensor officer reported, his voice carefully neutral. "Visual acquisition in 20 seconds. Core moved to the forward console, leaning one hand on the edge as the first grainy image began to resolve on the main display. Against the rolling blue of the sea, a dark hull emerged, low, fast, slicing across the water with intent. No flag, no identifying marks. A murmur went through the watchstanders before discipline snapped it silent again. Lena stood near the auxiliary bank, eyes scanning not just the vessel's outline, but the data flickering beside it. Engine output, wave pattern, bearing. Something about the approach felt wrong. It was too direct, too unwavering for a vessel. That should have been at least curious about the ship's challenge signals. Core straightened. "Bring weapons to ready. Hold fire!" The order moved through the crew like a charge, energizing stations but keeping them leashed. The deck's intercom chimed. Bridge to control. Target is maintaining speed and vector. Still no response to hails. Copy, Core said. He didn't look away from the screen. Lena's fingers moved over her console, digging deeper into the targeting telemetry. She wasn't here to fight, officially. She wasn't even here to advise. But the numbers didn't care about roles. They told their story regardless of who read them. She found it, a signal buried in the vessel's radar signature. It was faint, masked by the ambient scatter, but there, a short, repeating pulse on a frequency that had no business being in civilian hands. "Commander," she said quietly, "that's not a random contact. They're using a guidance link, same band we saw in the Hormuz files." Core's head turned sharply. "You're sure?" "Yes." His jaw set. "You know what that means." It wasn't a question. Before they could speak further, the comms officer called out, "They've altered heading, coming straight for us." The main display updated, the contact now locked in ahead online. At this range, there was no pretending it was accidental. Core's voice was crisp. "Prepare to disable. No warhead detonation unless authorized." The fire control crew adjusted settings, the whine of capacitors building in the background. Lena's eyes flicked to the guidance status. Stable, thanks to her earlier work. But she knew the margin for error was razor thin if they tried a non-lethal intercept. Range? 1 mile? The image on the screen had sharpened, angular bow, spray thrown high on either side, wake foaming white behind. Whoever was at the helm was pushing their craft hard. Core gave a single nod to the weapons officer. "Target propulsion. Fire on my mark." The room tensed. Lena could almost feel the beat between heartbeats as everyone waited for the word. Mark. The ship's launcher thumped, a streak leaping from the deck into open air. On the display, the projectile cut toward the smaller craft, adjusting minutely mid-flight. Halfway there, Lena saw it, the pulse from the target shifting, warping the guidance path. It was subtle, but it would pull the shot just enough off course to miss entirely. "Override Channel 3, she snapped. The weapons officer hesitated, eyes darting to Core. "Do it!" Core barked. Lena's hands were already in motion, bypassing the automated vectoring and forcing a hard correction. The intercept angle swung tighter, dangerously tight. But it was the only way to compensate. Impact. Not an explosion, just a violent burst of spray and the sudden lurch of the target's wake as its speed dropped. Propulsion disabled, the sensor officer confirmed. They're dead in the water. A collective exhale moved through the room. Core didn't relax. "Launch recon drone. I want eyes on that deck." Within moments, a small UAV was airborne, its camera feed sliding onto the main display. The image steadied on the damaged vessel. Several figures were visible, scrambling near the stern, one of them shoving something overboard. Lena's stomach tightened. She knew that shape. It was a signal booster, the kind used to mask transmissions until the last second. Core saw it too. They were trying to draw us into firing blind. The recon feed panned, catching a glimpse of a symbol hastily painted near the bow. It was crude but familiar, an insignia from a group long thought dissolved. "Bring them aboard," Core ordered. The recovery crews mobilized. As the ship maneuvered to intercept, the control deck shifted from combat readiness to coordinated retrieval. Lena stayed at her console, running a sweep for any residual signals. Her screen pinged, brief, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't coming from the crippled craft. She traced it, isolating the origin. Her pulse slowed in that way it always did when the danger was close but not yet acknowledged. The source was on their own ship. Core's attention was on the retrieval operations. Lena stepped to his side, lowering her voice. "We've got a leak on board." He turned, his expression unreadable. "You can confirm that?" "I just did." His gaze flicked to the crew working around them, the easy efficiency of sailors following orders. Somewhere in that mix was someone feeding data to the people they'd just stopped. "We'll deal with it," he said, quietly. The crippled vessel was being hauled in now, its crew under guard. The drone feed cut off as the recovery team took over. Core signaled to the operations officer, "Secure the prisoners. No comms access. I want every device they carried inventoried and locked." The officer moved to carry out the order. Lena returned to her station, masking her screen from casual view. She began logging the pulse she'd caught, its intervals, its slight drift, the signature imprint in the encryption. It was too deliberate to be an accident. She could feel Core's eyes on her again. When she looked up, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a signal, "Keep going." Outside the hull, the sea was calm again, the disabled craft now little, more than a shadow against the steel flank of the larger ship. But inside, the air was heavier. The real threat wasn't the boat they'd stopped. It was the hand that had guided it here from within their own walls. For Lena, the conclusion was inescapable. Whatever cover she'd hoped to keep was eroding with each step. And if the leak was who she suspected, the next move wouldn't just test her skills. It would demand she step fully back into the life she'd tried to leave. The holding bay was colder than the rest of the ship, the kind of cold that crept through fabric and settled in the skin. The steel benches bolted to the deck were bare, offering no comfort to the 5 soaked men sitting under armed watch. Their eyes tracked every movement of the security detail, but none spoke. Core stood just inside the doorway, Lena beside him. The door sealed with a heavy clunk behind them, isolating the space from the hum of the main decks. "They've said nothing since we brought them aboard," the security chief reported. "No IDs, no requests for counsel, just silence." Core gave a short nod and stepped forward. His boots echoed in the stillness as he approached the nearest prisoner. A wiry man with salt-bleached hair and a stare like glass. "You know who we are," Core said, "and you know what happens if you try to play games on my ship." The man's lips twitched, but no words came. Lena watched from a slight angle, her gaze sweeping over the group. Their clothing was mismatched, functional, with no insignia save for faint outlines where patches had been removed. But she noticed the details others might miss, the way their boots were scuffed in the same pattern, the identical cut of their gloves, the absence of calluses on their trigger fingers. These were not fishermen turned desperate, they were professionals. Core shifted to the second man, younger, broad-shouldered, a faint scar curling from his jaw to his neck. "What's the plan?" Core asked him directly. "You run in close, you jam our systems, then what? Sink us? Board us?" No response. Lena stepped closer. "You wouldn't come at a ship like this without knowing exactly what's aboard, which means you have a friend here. Someone feeding you information precise enough to time your run." One of the men flinched, just a fraction, but enough to catch her trained eye. He was seated at the far end, head down, pretending disinterest. She walked over, slow, letting the sound of her steps fill the gap. When she stopped in front of him, he raised his eyes. There was no defiance there, only calculation. "You're the one carrying the uplink," she said. He blinked once, deliberately. A smirk threatened at the corner of his mouth. Core noticed it too. "Search him!" The guard moved in, patting down the prisoner until his hand paused at the man's boot. He pulled free a slim, waterproof transmitter, no bigger than a pack of cards. The smirk widened. Core took the device, turning it over in his palm. "Not standard issue." "Where'd you get it?" The prisoner leaned back against the bench, silent. Lena looked at the transmitter. The casing was scuffed, but she recognized the build, military grade, retooled for black market use. "This can't transmit far on its own," she said. "It needs a booster." "Which means," Core finished for her, "there's still one active on board." The prisoner's smirk broke into a grin, as if pleased they were catching up. Core turned sharply. "Get them to secure isolation, double guards, no one in or out without my clearance." As the security team moved the prisoners, Lena lingered by the hatch. She knew what came next, sweeping the ship for the booster. But with the leak still active, every step would be shadowed. When they returned to the control deck, the ship was already at work. Patrols moved down corridors, technicians checked comm panels, and the buzz of quiet urgency ran through every station. Core led Lena into his ready room again, the door shutting out the noise. "You've worked with this tech before," he said without preamble. "Find the booster." She met his gaze. "And when I do?" His answer was flat. "We take out whoever's running it." It was the kind of order that didn't leave space for questions. Lena tapped into the ship's internal sensor net, feeding her query through multiple relays to avoid tipping off whoever was listening. The booster would emit a low-level handshake signal every few seconds. Too faint to trigger standard alerts, but enough for someone who knew where to look. There, 2 decks down, aft section. A pulse, regular and deliberate. She zoomed in on the schematic. The location was too convenient, near a maintenance hub with open access to exterior cabling. Perfect for transmitting without drawing attention. Core studied the readout. "You know this ship better than I expected." She didn't respond. She was already considering the angles, how to approach without letting the operator bolt, how to secure the device intact for tracing. Core keyed the comm to the security chief. "Meet us at junction C-17. Bring 2 men." Minutes later, they were moving through the narrow service passageways, the air cooler here, the lights dimmer. The hum of the main engines vibrated faintly through the walls. They stopped at the junction. Beyond the bulkhead was the hub, pipes, conduits, and the constant quiet drip of condensation from overhead valves. Core nodded to Lena. "You're up." She slipped inside first, scanning the tangle of machinery. The booster was tucked against a support strut, wires trailing into a conduit port. It was active, tiny indicator pulsing in rhythm with the signal she'd tracked. No one was in sight. She gestured for the guards to cover the exits, then knelt to inspect the device. Whoever had placed it knew what they were doing. The wiring was clean, the mounting quick release. This was meant to be retrieved in seconds. Core joined her, crouching. "Can you pull the signal log?" "Yes, but not from here. It'll trip a failsafe. Then we take it intact." She disconnected the power feed first, then eased the unit free. The pulse stopped. Somewhere on the ship, the operator would know they'd lost their link. Core stood, scanning the shadows beyond the machinery. "They'll make a move soon." Lena slipped the booster into a shielded pouch. "Then we'd better be ready." As they left the hub, the low wail of the general alarm began to roll through the ship. It wasn't the urgent cry of battle stations, but it was close, a warning that whatever game had started was about to change pace. And in Lena's gut, the certainty grew. This wasn't over. The board was just being reset, and the next play would demand more from her than she'd given in years. The alarm's low-pitched cry pulsed through every corridor, reverberating in the steel like the ship's own heartbeat quickening. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, eyes scanning for instructions, hands ready to execute. But there was a difference in the air now, an edge sharpened by the knowledge that the enemy might already be inside the skin of the vessel. Lena moved fast, the shielded pouch containing the recovered booster swinging lightly at her side. Core kept pace, his expression unreadable, his voice clipped as he relayed orders into his comm. Seal all compartments from frame 6 aft. Lock non-essential personnel in secure muster points. All maintenance hatches guarded or welded shut. The general alarm gave way to the ship-wide address system. The security chief's voice carried over the speakers. All crew, be advised, internal security sweep in progress. Report any suspicious movement immediately. Lena had no doubt the traitor had already heard. Whoever it was would be calculating the next move. Maybe even improvising now that the booster was gone. They reached the control deck just as the tactical display updated with a new contact. This one wasn't on the surface. Underwater approach detected, the sonar officer announced, tension in his tone. Possible submersible. Range 700 meters and closing. Kor's eyes narrowed.
And our sonar net didn't pick it up until now?
The officer hesitated. There's a gap in the last sweep data. Lena's hands moved to an auxiliary panel, calling up the logs. The data gap was deliberate, masked by what looked like a normal noise filter routine. It had been slipped in quietly, the sort of tampering you only noticed if you went looking for it. She didn't look at Kor when she spoke. The gap was inserted from an internal terminal. Someone here helped them get this close. His reply was flat, decisive. Find out who. Before she could dig deeper, the deck lurched. Not from a hit, but from a sudden change in propulsion. A throttle-down maneuver ordered without clearance. Kor turned sharply toward the helm. Who ordered that? The helmsman's voice shook. It came from secondary control. We didn't initiate. Kor snapped into his comm, ordering the override codes to seize back control. The ship's speed stabilized, but the few seconds of slowdown had given the approaching submersible precious ground. Lena ran the location trace on the unauthorized command. Her stomach tightened. The terminal was 2 decks below, near the same maintenance hub where they'd found the booster. Kor caught her eye. You're with me. They moved quickly, the guards falling in around them. The corridor lighting had dimmed to alert status, casting everything in long shadows. When they reached the hub, the hatch was ajar. Inside, the glow of a panel cast a faint halo over a crouched figure. The person looked up as they entered, a crewman Lena recognized only in passing, a communications tech with an unremarkable service record. Kor's voice was ice. Step away from the console. The tech's gaze flicked between them, calculating. Then his hand darted to the side, hitting a control. Lena didn't think. She moved. In 2 strides she was on him, wrenching his arm away from the panel, driving him back against the bulkhead. The guards surged in, forcing him to the deck. Kor scanned the console. He transmitted coordinates. Short burst could be enough for targeting. Lena knelt by the console, fingers flying over the keys. I can scrub the packet before it completes a handshake. But it's going to light up everything in their network if I touch it wrong. The comm tech laughed, breathless from the struggle. You can't erase it all. They've already got your number. Lena's eyes narrowed. You have no idea whose number you just called. She keyed a sequence, faster, deeper than the standard operations language. And the console's interface shifted, revealing a hidden command environment. The guards and even Kor leaned slightly closer, recognizing the significance of what they were seeing. The Comtech's smirk faltered. Lena's voice was steady as she worked, routing through ghost relays, injecting false data, cycling the checksum. She hit the final key. Done. Their map now thinks we're 3 nautical miles east and moving at 20 knots. Kor's gaze lingered on her, the unspoken question plain. Only someone with black tier clearance could manipulate a system at that depth. The guards hauled the Comtech to his feet. Kor ordered him taken to high-security confinement. When they were alone, he spoke quietly. "Ravenex wasn't just a protocol, was it?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The way she'd just handled that console said more than any confession. The ship vibrated subtly as the propulsion returned to full, but the sonar officer's voice over the comm killed any relief. "Commander's submersible is still on intercept course, adjusted bearing to compensate for our decoy signal." Lena stepped to the nearest wall comm. "Send me their projected intercept window." Seconds later, the data arrived. She studied it, mind already mapping out possible counters. Most involved weapon systems she technically wasn't supposed to touch. She turned to Kor. "If we wait for them to get into torpedo range, we'll be on defense. But if we take the shot now before they close, we can force them to break pursuit." He crossed his arms. "You've run this play before, something like it." His eyes searched hers. "You're telling me that if I hand you fire control, you can thread the needle and disable them without blowing them apart. I'm telling you that if you don't, you'll have to explain to Fleet Command why your ship took a hit when you had someone on deck who could stop it." That was enough. Minutes later, Lena was back at the primary guidance console. The crew around her worked in a strange mix of awe and tension. Their earlier doubts stripped away by the quiet authority in her movements. She set the intercept parameters, factoring in the submersible's speed, depth, and the unpredictable currents in this sector. Her plan was to deploy a high-yield acoustic charge, enough to cripple their systems without hull rupture. But it would require perfect placement. Kor's voice came from behind her. "All stations stand by. Firing on Arden's mark." The targeting reticle pulsed on her display. She fine-tuned it, making micro-adjustments until the solution was as close to flawless as the sea would allow. "Mark!" The deck shuddered gently as the charge left its housing. On sonar, the trace curved downward, cutting clean toward the contact. A long moment of silence stretched. Then the sonar officer spoke, voice tight with relief. "Contact is losing speed. Depth control failing. They're surfacing." The control deck erupted in quiet applause, the restrained kind that came from professionals acknowledging precision. Lena leaned back, exhaling slowly. She'd bought them time, but she knew it was just that, time. Whoever was orchestrating this wouldn't stop after one failed approach. Kor stepped to her side. "You've just confirmed every suspicion I had." She glanced at him, a wry edge to her voice. "And what are you going to do with that, Commander?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze moved over the crew, the deck, the instruments. Then he met her eyes. "Depends how long you're willing to stay in this fight." Her reply was simple. "As long as it takes." The control deck slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the undercurrent of adrenaline hadn't bled out yet. Crew members moved with a sharpened awareness, their glances toward Lena no longer dismissive but measuring, trying to reconcile the quiet contractor with the operator who had just executed a precision strike at sea. The crippled submersible bobbed on the surface a few hundred meters off, the port side under the watch of two armed ribs circling in slow arcs. The prisoners from the earlier vessel were now joined by the submersible, his crew in the holding bay, doubling the security chief's workload. Kor had called a closed meeting in the operations planning room, a small space sealed off from the main decks. The bulkheads here were lined with acoustic dampeners, the lighting low enough to keep the bank of hollow displays easy on the eyes. When Lena stepped inside, the room was already occupied by Kor, the security chief, and the ship's intelligence officer, Lieutenant Imani. Kor didn't waste time. We intercepted 2 hostile assets today, one on the surface, one underwater. Both were operating with live intel about our position. That means someone is still feeding them from inside. Imani tapped the console, bringing up a split display, one side showing the disabled submersible, the other a schematic of the ship. Both teams carried equipment designed to link to a remote command structure. That's not local piracy. It's coordinated, funded, and backed by someone who can acquire military-grade comms tech. The security chief spoke next. We've been sweeping comms traffic on board since we pulled the booster, but so far, nothing else is transmitting. If the leak is smart, they'll lay low for a while. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Kor said. He turned to Lena. We make them think they still have the upper hand. Let them believe they've got us on a string. Meanwhile, we feed them something worth biting. It didn't take Lena long to understand. You want to turn the ship into bait, Kor nodded. We leak a controlled piece of intel, fake orders, a false rendezvous. It has to be tempting enough for them to move, but structured so that, when they do, we can follow the trail back to whoever's running this. Imani glanced between them. We can't risk letting the wrong coordinates slip into real channels. If the leak passes them out, they could still cause a live engagement in contested waters. That's why we'll plant it deep in a secure layer only someone with access and motive would bother to extract, Lena said. Kor gave her the floor. She outlined the plan with the precision of someone used to operating in contested space. We build a packet marked Fleet Priority, Command Eyes Only. It contains a schedule for a munitions handoff in international waters. We encrypt it with a pattern that looks breakable but isn't. At least not without triggering a trace beacon. If they take the bait and transmit it, we'll know exactly where it goes. Imani was already typing notes. We can stage the false handoff coordinates about 40 nautical miles from here, in a corridor with limited civilian traffic. Easier to isolate any contact that shows up. Kor's gaze stayed on Lena. You can build that encryption layer? Yes, she said without hesitation. And I can make it look like it was never meant to leave this room. An hour later, they were in the comms lab, the hum of processors filling the air. Lena worked at a secure terminal while Imani monitored the ship's internal network for anomalies. Every keystroke Lena made was deliberate, choosing an encryption method common enough to feel real but subtly flawed in a way that would be irresistible to a skilled intruder. The message itself was short and surgical, a supposed order for the Aegis Valor to receive high-yield ordnance from a classified source. The coordinates were set in a location that could be reached in 6 hours. Long, enough to allow pursuit, short enough to keep the leak from getting cold feet. When it was ready, Kor authorized its placement in the secure archive, where only a handful of senior officers and the traitor would ever have reason to look. Now came the waiting. The ship resumed its patrol at a steady pace, the sea a deep, endless blue under a hard noon sun. From the outside, everything looked routine. Inside, the air felt like a coiled spring. Security teams rotated through their posts, sensors swept in continuous cycles, and Lena kept a quiet watch from the shadows of the control deck. 3 hours in, Imani's voice came through Kor's earpiece. Flag just tripped. Someone accessed the archive. Kor's glance found Lena instantly. She was already moving toward the secure monitoring station. By the time they arrived, the system had logged the event in detail. Terminal location, timestamp, and the identity tag used for access. Kor's jaw tightened. The tag belonged to a supply officer, a man with no operational need to access fleet priority files. "Where is he now?" "Cargo deck, Section D," Imani replied. "Not alone. He's supervising a loading crew." Kor didn't hesitate. "We keep him under observation. If he's the conduit, he'll try to pass the intel before the fake rendezvous time." For the next hour, Lena shadowed the cargo deck's camera feeds, watching the supply officer's every move. He worked as if nothing were amiss, moving crates, signing off manifests, chatting idly with the crew. Then, without warning, he stepped into a maintenance alcove and keyed in a short code on his personal datapad. Lena caught it instantly. "That's a transmission handshake." Kor moved fast. "Track it!" The signal leapt from the datapad to an unregistered repeater hidden in a storage container, then out into open air. It was headed straight for a relay buoy positioned well outside standard patrol routes. Imani's fingers flew. "I can trace the endpoint. It's routing to a mobile command vessel. No registry, running dark." Kor gave the order, "Helm, adjust course. Vector 210, full speed. All stations to readiness." The bridge acknowledged, and the ship leaned slightly as it came about. Lena stayed on the trace. The command vessel wasn't far, less than 20 nautical miles, but it was already moving, likely alerted by the signal. Kor turned to her. "Once we get eyes on them, I want options. Capture if possible, disable if not." She nodded, already considering firing arcs, approach vectors, and the fastest way to pin a moving target in open water without letting it slip into neutral territory. As the distance closed, the tension on the control deck thickened. The sea ahead was empty on the naked eye, but the tactical display painted the truth, a sleek hull running parallel to the horizon, keeping just far enough to avoid direct challenge. "They know we're coming," Imani said quietly. "Then we don't give them time to think," Lena replied. Kor's voice carried through the deck. "Bring us into intercept range. Weapons stand by." The horizon seemed to draw closer with each passing second, the faint outline of the target resolving through the haze. Lena's hands rested lightly on the guidance controls, every sense tuned to the coming engagement. She'd stepped back into the role she'd avoided for years, not just as a technician but as a hunter. And this time the prey was already in her sights. The horizon boiled with tension as the Aegis Valor carved a steady line through the sapphire sea, engines humming like predatory beasts in anticipation. Every officer on deck moved with mechanical precision, though the tightness in their shoulders betrayed the gravity of the approaching encounter. Lena stayed beside the tactical console, eyes flicking between streaming data and the slowly resolving image of the rogue command vessel on the horizon. It was small, agile, and built for stealth, unregistered, without any visible markings, and moving with the fluidity of a shadow at sea. Yet the subtle disruptions in water flow, the faint heat signatures, betrayed its presence to Lena's trained senses. Kor's voice cut across the deck, low and unwavering. "All stations, confirm weapons ready. This isn't a drill. Prepare to engage only on my order." The crew acknowledged in clipped tones, the tension palpable but disciplined. Lena's fingers hovered above the controls, not moving yet, but her mind was already 3 steps ahead. Anticipated maneuvers, potential ambush points, environmental hazards and escape vectors. The rogue ship was a phantom, but not fast enough to outrun the calculated interception the Aegis Valor was about to execute. Imani leaned over Lena's shoulder, whispering in that controlled, analytical tone. "They're running dark comms, minimal radar cross-section. Whoever is aboard knows exactly how to avoid detection. But the trace we planted, they've taken the bait. If they act too early, they expose themselves. Lena's jaw tightened. They'll act. Greed and urgency will override caution. That's why timing is everything. Above deck, the sun burned down, casting the sea in shades of molten cobalt. Waves lapped against the hull in a hypnotic rhythm, but inside, every heartbeat matched the pulse of anticipation. Lena's gaze sharpened as the rogue vessel adjusted course, slowly edging toward the false rendezvous coordinates. Kor approached, a thin line of tension cutting across his brow. "Lena, I need that encryption layer ready for immediate deployment. If they try to jam or redirect, we'll counter them and keep them feeding." She nodded, already typing commands into a secure node. A matrix of firewalls, decoys, and trace beacons unfolded on the screens before her. Each sequence was precise, a digital dance choreographed to trap whoever dared to intercept. This wasn't just countermeasure, it was a lure designed to expose the predator hidden among the waves. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the rogue vessel made its move. It accelerated, adjusting toward the coordinates. And Lena saw the signature shift on the tactical display. A subtle rise in heat output, an increase in micro-movements suggesting external load and internal activity. They're preparing to offload or access the payload. Lena murmured, voice tight with controlled anticipation. Kor's eyes narrowed. "Keep monitoring. We don't fire unless I say. I want eyes on them, fully exposed before we act." Through the optical sensors, Lena could discern the contours of the vessel. Crates lined the deck, sealed containers with electronic locks. The crew aboard moved efficiently, unaware, or maybe unbothered, that they were about to walk straight into a trap. Then came the first surprise. One of the containers erupted in a brief flash of sparks, smoke curling upward like ghostly fingers. Lena's breath caught. It wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate test, a diversion. The rogue crew was probing, trying to detect the integrity of the encryption she had embedded. She reacted instantly, deploying counter-signals to simulate a breach, feeding them false alarm readings to manipulate their decisions. Kor noticed the subtle shift on the display. "Nice. They've bitten. Keep it going." The rogue vessel's commander, if one could even identify a singular figure, now moved in the open, signaling, with hand gestures and verbal commands that Lena caught only partially through intercepted audio. The precision, the decisiveness, the familiarity with advanced tactical operations, it was almost haunting. Imani leaned close, voice laced with awe and disbelief. "Lena, whoever's aboard, they've been trained. This isn't amateur hour." Lena didn't answer, her eyes glued to the interface. She saw the patterns unfold exactly as she had predicted: missteps, exposure points, and overconfidence. A fleeting smirk crossed her face, not out of amusement, but recognition. Suddenly, the rogue vessel veered sharply, trying to escape along a secondary route. Lena's hand flew to the override, recalibrating the predictive intercept algorithm. "They're trying to split," she said. "We can't let them scatter." Kor's voice cut through, firm and commanding. "Deploy pursuit teams and non-lethal disabling systems. Keep them intact if possible, but neutralize movement." From hidden launchers along the hull, electromagnetic nets shot forth, arcs of restrained energy forming a web across the rogue ship's projected path. It wasn't lethal, but it would disable engines and prevent further evasive maneuvers. Lena's eyes flicked to the tactical readouts. The rogue vessel shuddered, its propulsion dampened, and the micro-adjustments in their movement revealed panic. "They're in over their heads!" Lena said, voice low but steady. And then came the moment that made the deck fall silent. A single operator on the rogue vessel, a figure in dark tactical gear, moved to the control station, initiating a rapid override sequence. Lena froze for a heartbeat, recognizing the speed and efficiency of the maneuvers. The operator wasn't just skilled, they were lethal in precision and calculation. Core noticed her reaction. What is it? They're trained like me, Lena admitted, the words heavy. This is someone who's done what I've done, Raven X level. I can predict some moves, but they're fast. The Aegis Valor adjusted, cutting off the rogue vessel's access to open water, maneuvering to funnel them toward a controlled intercept zone. Lena's fingers danced over the terminal, feeding calculated counter-sequences to the rogue operator's attempts to break the encryption trap. Hold steady, she whispered to herself. Don't let them see you flinch. And then it happened. A surge of alarms, a flood of system warnings. The rogue operator had pushed the envelope, attempting a live override to hijack the false payload. Lena's mind raced. Every option unfolded like a branching tree. She couldn't afford a miscalculation. Then instinct took over. Lena deployed a precision counterstrike. A digital pulse routed through the hidden beacons she had set earlier. It isolated the operator's access, seizing control of the container, locks and forcing a shutdown without triggering explosive failsafes. The rogue vessel shuddered again. Core exhaled sharply. They're contained. Boarding teams. Prep for extraction. Everyone else, maintain perimeter. Lena allowed herself a moment to breathe. She knew what the boarding would reveal. Whoever orchestrated this, whoever trained that operator, they weren't amateurs. They were part of a network designed to challenge, to push boundaries, and to test operators like her. Through the optical feed, she caught the first glimpse of the operator's face. As boarding teams made contact, a hardened mask, eyes sharp and calculating. For a split second, she recognized the features, the posture, the subtle rhythm of muscle memory. It was almost impossible, yet undeniable, a former Raven X operative, one thought erased from operational records. Core approached her, eyes wide, a rare tremor in his composed demeanor. You knew I did, Lena admitted, and they knew I'd be involved. This was planned for someone like me to intercept. The boarding was clean, efficient. The rogue operator was subdued, restrained but unharmed. Lena watched the confrontation quietly, understanding the stakes and the message. This wasn't just about stolen intel. It was about testing Raven X operatives against one another, seeing who remained capable, who could adapt, who would falter. As the rogue crew was escorted to secure compartments, Lena and Core stood. Together on the deck, the ocean stretching endlessly around them. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the vessel. You handled it perfectly, Core said quietly, his tone carrying unspoken respect. Lena didn't reply immediately, her eyes lingering on the rogue operator, now being processed below deck. The recognition, the history, the weight of Raven X hung heavily in the air. She finally spoke, voice low but firm. This isn't over. Whoever set this up, they'll try again. They always do. And next time, I'll be ready. Core nodded. Then we'll be ready with you. For the first time since stepping aboard the Aegis Valor, Lena allowed herself to feel the faintest echo of purpose, of belonging, of the life she had hidden for so long converging with the present. The waves lapped against the hull, steady and indifferent, but inside, the currents of strategy, skill, and hidden history swirled with renewed intensity. The interior of the Aegis Valor was alive with the low hum of machinery, and the quiet urgency of operators scanning every incoming feed. Lena stood slightly apart from the crew, observing the rogue operator in the secure containment module. Every movement, every twitch of muscle, every glint in their eyes spoke volumes. This wasn't merely an adversary, it was a message. Core approached, footsteps deliberate, voice soft but carrying weight. "Lena, get a look at the communications feed. You'll want to see this." She moved to the terminal, hands steady but senses alert. The feed displayed intercepted transmissions between the rogue operator and an unseen command entity. The words were brief, coded, almost innocuous if one didn't know what to look for. But Lena's eyes caught the pattern, the rhythm, the references, the subtle nods to protocols only Raven X-trained operatives would recognize. "They're coordinating something bigger," Lena murmured, voice low, almost a whisper. "This isn't just an isolated test." Core's expression tightened. "How big?" She shook her head. "Enough to make a single failure catastrophic." The room seemed to contract, each officer acutely aware that the calm they had felt moments ago was illusory. Lena tapped commands rapidly, overlaying predictive models atop the intercepted communication logs. The rogue operator's network wasn't fully active yet, but Lena could anticipate movements, possible breaches, and potential targets. Imani appeared beside her, eyes scanning the same data streams. "You're saying we've been baited into this? That all the maneuvers, the intercept, it was meant to expose Raven X operatives?" "Yes," Lena replied without hesitation, "and I'm afraid we're not the only ones who've fallen into the trap." On deck, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the vessel in a palette of bruised purples and muted golds. The long shadows mirrored the unease creeping through the crew. Lena remained at the terminal, silent, calculating. She could feel the weight of history pressing down, the missions left unrecorded, the code names buried under layers of secrecy. And now, the living ghosts of Raven X emerging to challenge what she had fought to leave behind. A sudden alert pierced the quiet, a signal detected, originating from a nearby freighter moving with suspicious speed and erratic patterns. Lena's fingers danced across the interface, isolating the source and running countertrace sequences. The readings confirmed it. Another operative, another piece in a network Lena hadn't fully realized was still active. "They're mobilizing faster than I anticipated," she said, her voice sharp, betraying the first flicker of tension. "If they reach the coastal facility, they can access systems we can't allow them to touch." Core's eyes narrowed. "Then we move full alert. All units to stations, Lena. We follow your lead." The crew sprang into action, the deck transforming into a hive of focused motion. Lena remained at the tactical console, orchestrating maneuvers like a conductor guiding a symphony of precision. Every decision was a calculated risk, every command a delicate balance between aggression and containment. As the Aegis Valor changed course, Lena felt a subtle shift in the air. An almost imperceptible pressure that hinted at an unseen observer. Her mind raced through Raven X training, anticipate, adapt, overcome. The rogue operator was skilled, but now they had to contend with Lena's full capabilities. She deployed a series of digital decoys, a web of false signals, and traceable markers designed to manipulate the enemy's perception. At the same time, she coordinated with Core to adjust the vessel's trajectory, cutting off potential escape routes while keeping the operational envelope safe for civilian observation zones. Minutes stretched, the tension thick as fog. Then the freighter appeared on the horizon, its silhouette jagged against the fading light. Lena's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the thrill of engagement, the silent recognition of a puzzle only Raven X-operatives could solve in real time. The rogue operator on the freighter initiated a signal jamming protocol attempting to disrupt Lena's interference. The alerts on her terminal spiked, but she didn't flinch. Fingers flying over controls, she rerouted power, adjusted encryption layers, and countered the jamming with surgical precision. Every action was a mirror of past missions, honed over years of clandestine operations. On deck, Core barked orders, his voice firm but aware of Lena's dominance over the situation. All tracking arrays active, boarding teams ready. No mistakes. Lena leaned forward, eyes narrowing as she decoded a sudden anomaly in the freighter's pattern. A small craft, barely visible, detaching and moving at high speed toward the shoreline. "They're splitting forces," she warned. "If that craft reaches the facility, it could trigger a cascade. We can't let it happen." Imani's voice, tinged with awe, broke the concentrated silence. "You're seeing this before anyone else. How do you—" "I've seen it all before," Lena replied, her tone quiet but unwavering. "Patterns repeat. Operators react predictably. It's in their instincts. And I know the instincts because they're mine once were." The chase escalated. The freighter adjusted its route, attempting to regain control of the engagement. Lena countered with a series of electromagnetic pulses, disabling auxiliary engines without harming crew members, carefully threading the line between containment and caution. The small craft veered, narrowly missing the shallow shoals, and Lena predicted its trajectory. Down to the second, rerouting a nearby drone to intercept and block its path. On deck, the crew watched the unfolding precision, unaware of the depth of skill controlling every movement. Core exhaled sharply, tension visible in the tightening of his jaw. "She's in a league of her own," he muttered. Lena felt no pride, only focus. The rogue operator on the freighter was testing limits, pushing boundaries, trying to measure the skill of the Raven X operative who had been dormant, hidden under the guise of civilian work. And now, exposed, she responded with clarity and authority, every decision a counterpoint to their moves. The small craft finally slowed, trapped between the drone blockade and the calculated positioning of the Aegis Valor. Lena issued the final override, a digital web of commands locking the craft in place. It hung suspended, caught by invisible threads, unable to reach the facility or detonate whatever payload it carried. The rogue freighter signaled surrender, a silent acknowledgement of defeat, and Lena allowed herself a brief, measured exhale. The first wave was contained, the immediate threat neutralized, yet the knowledge of a wider network lingered, unspoken, pressing against the edges of her mind. Core approached once more, placing a firm hand on Lena's shoulder. "We stopped them, but you know this isn't over." She nodded, eyes never leaving the screens. "No, this is just the beginning. Whoever orchestrated this, whoever knew I'd be here, they've only revealed the first move, and I'll be ready for the next." The crew began securing systems, recalibrating sensors, and preparing for a debrief. But Lena stayed focused, reviewing every movement, every intercepted communication, and every anomaly. She understood now that the Raven X legacy wasn't just a past, it was a continuum, a living network of operatives, codes, and contingencies stretching far beyond the confines of any single vessel. As night descended, the lights of the Aegis Valor glimmered against the Black Sea, each glow a testament to the coordination, skill, and vigilance required to maintain control. Lena stood at the tactical console, eyes sharp, mind racing, knowing that the calm would be temporary. But for now, The first storm had passed, and she had proven once again why. Raven X operatives were unmatched in their precision, intuition, and resolve. She allowed herself a single thought, quiet and resolute: the world may never understand what Raven X could do, but tonight she had shown them anyway. And somewhere in the shadows beyond radar and reach, the network that had tested her now recalculated, setting the stage for the inevitable next confrontation. Lena was ready. The night air on the deck of the Aegis Valor was thick with tension, carrying the scent of salt and machine oil, the hum of generators beneath a darkened sky. Lena remained at the tactical console, eyes scanning every feed, every blinking indicator. The rogue network, having suffered its initial defeat, was recalibrating, shifting positions, adapting, but Lena's mind was already 10 steps ahead, weaving contingencies like threads in an intricate tapestry. Core approached, voice low, measured. "They're moving again. We have confirmation of multiple assets converging on the coastal command hub. This isn't a drill. Lena, if they breach that facility—" "I know," Lena interrupted, her gaze unwavering. "They're expecting chaos. I won't give it to them." The command hub sat isolated on the rocky shoreline, surrounded by a buffer of security perimeters, yet Lena could see through the patterns in the data. Small drones, microvessels, remote detonations. The rogue network intended to overwhelm the defenses, trigger an irreversible cascade, and slip past unnoticed. But they underestimated Raven X. Lena's hands flew over the console, a symphony of precision. She activated countermeasures, redirecting defensive drones, deploying electromagnetic counterwaves and intercepting incoming signals. Every calculation was exact, every intervention surgical. The rogue operator's network pushed back with fury, but Lena had anticipated their moves. Suddenly, alarms shrieked. A new threat vector. A stealth craft emerged from the horizon, cloaked in darkness, fast and unpredictable. It wasn't just a test, it was an assassination attempt, an audacious strike, meant to claim Lena before the network fully revealed its intentions. "Tracker anomaly," Imani shouted, fingers moving over her terminal. "It's small, fast, too fast for conventional intercept." Lena's eyes narrowed. "Then we go unconventional." Within seconds, she deployed an autonomous microdrone, a Raven X prototype designed for instantaneous adaptation. Its sensors locked onto the craft, predicting evasive maneuvers, plotting intercept courses in real time. Lena monitored every parameter, every vector, her mind operating at a pace no ordinary operator could comprehend. The stealth craft shifted, attempting to evade the intercept, but Lena anticipated its every move. The micro-drone flared beside it, a precise, invisible force corralling the vessel, guiding it away from populated zones. With a single command, Lena initiated an electromagnetic pulse, disabling the craft without harm, neutralizing its payload. The crew exhaled collectively, but Lena's attention was already elsewhere. On the tactical map, another anomaly emerged, a coordinated infiltration at the coastal facility. Lena's fingers danced over the console, routing security protocols, activating emergency lockdowns, and deploying counter-surveillance drones. She synchronized with Core, who was coordinating the boarding teams, giving them precise entry points, access corridors, and escape contingencies. "Lena, they've breached the outer perimeter!" one officer yelled. "Not for long," Lena replied calmly, voice steady, almost eerily composed. She traced the intruders' paths, predicting each movement, exploiting every predictable hesitation. The rogue network thought it could overwhelm human decision-making, but they hadn't accounted for Ravenek's intuition. On the ground, the intruders advanced through corridors lined with reinforced steel. Security teams engaged them, but Lena's guidance through comm channels ensured every move was controlled, every threat anticipated. Using remote control units, she manipulated environmental systems, lights, doors, and even automated defensive turrets to funnel adversaries into containment zones. Then, the rogue operator, the mastermind, appeared on the feeds. Cloaked, moving with purpose, a ghost in their own operation. Lena's eyes locked onto them instantly, recognizing patterns only someone trained in Raven X protocols could detect. Every gesture, every angle of approach, every pause was familiar, a language written in motion. Lena X, the operator, sneered over encrypted comms. "You think you can stop this? You're just a relic." "Relics aren't forgotten," Lena replied. "They adapt, survive, and decide the outcome." With surgical precision, Lena deployed a series of micro-tracers, locking onto the rogue operator's position. Boarding teams converged, guided by Lena's calculations, intercepting the operative before they could reach the command core. The confrontation was swift. In the containment chamber, Lena observed the rogue operator trapped, struggling, realizing their plans had unraveled. Their network's communications erupted in chaos, disorganized, scrambled, their advantage gone. But Lena knew the threat wasn't entirely neutralized. Even as the mastermind fell, signals indicated one last contingency, a payload, hidden in the coastal infrastructure, primed to detonate if unattended. Time was against her. She moved quickly, activating the counter-protocol Lena herself had once designed in the Raven X program. With hands moving over controls, she calculated the optimal disarm sequence, bypassing fail-safes designed to challenge even the most skilled operators. Every second mattered, every miscalculation potentially catastrophic. Alarms intensified, sweat pricked her brow. The crew watched silently, trusting her judgment, unaware of the full scope of the operation. Lena's mind ran on pure instinct and training, untangling the rogue sequence, isolating. The explosive matrix and redirecting energy flows away from critical systems. Finally, with a subtle shift of her fingers, Lena initiated the last override. A sequence of lights blinked green. The payload was neutralized. The coastal facility, the command hub, and countless lives were safe. She leaned back, allowing herself a moment of controlled exhale. The rogue network had been dismantled, their operatives captured or neutralized, and Lena had emerged unscathed. But the weight of the night lingered. She had been exposed, her Raven X identity known to those who had intended to manipulate it. And yet she had prevailed, unbowed, unbroken. Kor approached once again, voice filled with awe and respect. "You did what none of us could have imagined. Every calculation, every prediction, you were untouchable." Lena didn't smile, didn't seek praise. Her eyes scanned the aftermath, the secure feeds, the neutralized threats. "We did it together," she said softly. This was never about one person. The crew began the debrief, securing evidence, cataloging operations, and documenting the night's events. Lena remained focused, ensuring nothing was overlooked, knowing that even a single overlooked detail could ripple into disaster. Finally, Lena allowed herself a private moment, staring at the horizon where the first hints of dawn touched the sea. Memories of past missions, lost comrades, and secret operations surfaced, yet she felt no regret. Raven X was not a past, but a living legacy, and tonight had reaffirmed its enduring power. She reflected on the journey, the quiet calibration at the missile system that had revealed her identity, the mockery, the doubt, the rising tension, and the ultimate triumph. Every challenge had been met with precision, every obstacle anticipated, every outcome manipulated to secure the greater good. She had turned a potential disaster into a demonstration of skill, control, and resilience. A soft alert drew her attention, a final message from the rogue network. A single line of data marked with their signature, acknowledged, Raven X. It was both a warning and a recognition, a testament to the respect earned through competence and decisive action. Lena let the words sit for a moment, then deleted the message, knowing the war was ongoing, the world's balance fragile, and vigilance eternal. As the crew prepared to rest, Lena stood alone on the observation deck, the sea stretching endlessly before her. The weight of her hidden identity, the power of Raven X, and the responsibility it carried, pressed upon her, yet she felt a clarity, a purpose that transcended fear or doubt. The night had tested her, but she had risen, proving that even a name, lost to history, could shape the present and safeguard the future. In the soft glow of the first dawn, Lena allowed herself a single thought, resolute and unshakable. The world may never truly know Raven X, but tonight they had witnessed what one hidden operative could accomplish. The legacy was alive, and so was she. The Aegis Valor sailed steadily. The rogue network dismantled, the coastal hub secure, and Lena's presence, once underestimated, now etched into the minds of those who had sought to challenge her. This was not the end. It was the proving ground, the awakening of a force that would not be forgotten, a reminder that true skill, precision, and courage can never be contained. And somewhere, beyond radar, beyond reach, the remnants of the rogue network recalculated, aware now that the game had changed. Lena, Raven X, was ready for whatever came next. The night has faded, the storm of calculations, alarms, and danger finally giving way to the quiet hum of a world saved, if only for now. Lena, standing alone on the deck, allowed herself a breath she had been holding. For hours, the weight of Raven X resting heavily but proudly on her shoulders. The chaos she had navigated, the lives she had protected, and the secrets she had revealed were now behind her, or at least behind the immediate threat. This mission, this night, was more than a display of skill. It was a testament to preparation, courage, and the power of a mind that refused to be underestimated. Raven X was not just a code name, it was proof that hidden potential, when unleashed, with precision and clarity, could reshape outcomes that seemed impossible. To all of you watching, remember, the battles you don't see are often the ones that define the world around you. Every decision, every careful calculation, every act of bravery, whether recognized or unseen, ripples outward. Lena's journey reminds us that competence and courage are never wasted, and that even in the shadows, one person can make the impossible possible. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. How would you have reacted in Lena's place? Which moment struck you the most? Your perspective matters, and the conversation doesn't end here. Subscribe to Veteran Biker to stay on the front lines of stories that celebrate resilience, precision, and the unsung heroes shaping the world around us. Hit like if you felt the tension, the triumph, and the relentless drive of Raven X. Stay tuned for more stories that push boundaries, challenge assumptions, and reveal courage in its purest, most cinematic form. Thank you for watching, thank you for joining us on this journey, and remember, the next mission, the next challenge, the next revelation, it's always just beyond the horizon. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next story.